Hello, and welcome to CanCham Hong Kong and HKCVA's 8th Annual Transpacific Entrepreneurial Virtual Conference. This is session number 9, and it's all about the roadmap to a green future and sustainable opportunities. Lots to talk about, and we've got a panel of 3 very esteemed guests to walk us through this conversation. During this conversation and the session, if you'd like to submit any questions or comments via the chat box, please feel free to do so, and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions now or after the conference. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Terence Chow, and I head up the wealth management business for the Royal Bank of Canada here in Asia. We're very much also about driving towards a net zero economy in this world as well. And I'm very privileged to be leading and moderating this chat. I'll leave it to my other panelists to maybe introduce themselves, and maybe Anne, I'll pass it over to you to start.
Great. Thank you, Terence. Hello, everyone. My name is Anne Copeland. I've been working in the sustainability field for over 30 years, starting in stakeholder engagement in Canada for 5 years. And then I've been based in Hong Kong, working in Asia for, ever since. And I've worked mostly for consultancies, but also for university at the university and with the International Finance Corporation. So my work spans community engagement as well as a lot of corporate sector work, and in the financial sector, we're looking at environmental social governance risks, how they can be turned into opportunities, and then working with companies and the financial sector to integrate environmental social governance best practices. I was a co-founder of the Canadian Chamber Sustainable Development Committee, where we led the first multi-stakeholder engagements on what sustainable development meant for Hong Kong, and have continued with the committee, as well as being a co-lead of the Women's Network at the Chamber.
Great, thanks, Anne. And then Brent, maybe over to you for a brief intro of yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brent Lakeman. I'm the Director for Hydrogen Initiatives at Edmonton Global. And if you don't know much about Edmonton Global, we're a regional economic development agency really charged with supporting investment attraction within the metropolitan Edmonton region of Alberta, Canada. And as my title suggests, my focus is on hydrogen. My background has really been in climate change, clean energy for most of my career, and really excited to be working in this area right now as companies, governments from around the world look towards their net zero commitments, and hydrogen is increasingly playing a key role in that. So we really see our region, the Edmonton region, being a real preeminent center for hydrogen within our national economy and international mechanisms as well. So really happy to be here today to talk about some of the opportunities for collaboration between Edmonton and Canada and Asia around the hydrogen opportunity.
Awesome, thanks so much, Brent. And last but certainly not least, Joseph, maybe a brief intro of yourself as well.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Terence. Hello, everyone. I'm Joseph Chaung, as the founder and the president of the C4P. Our base and the head office is in Toronto, Canada. Also, I'm currently the president of the Hong Kong Canada Business Association, the GTA Toronto section. Get to have this opportunity to introduce our company and share my experience with all of you. I've been in the engineering and the product design and manufacturing business since mid of the 90s, which has brought me a very solid experience in my future career. Well, inspired me to join the green and sustainable energy business, which is happening in the beginning 2003 due to the power failure and the breakout in the east coast of the North America. I start to look into the renewable and the sustainable energy technology, not to produce, is how to use and apply the green energy and the sustainable energy. Successfully to build our first solar appliances prototyping in the 2009, and afterward as a commercialized and execution in the next step. We bring our product and successfully to launch the product on the 2011, and we become the first solar freezer manufacturing company in Canada, and expand our production line, and to diversify my business was our last 10-year roadmap. And currently we have our products such as like a solar freezer, refrigerator, solar air conditioning. We're licensing and private label for our customer. As well, the market is very big. I would say that is we involved with the automotive, marine, and also the construction business. Our business network through Hong Kong to Singapore, Japan, South Korea, and absolutely China as well. We also bring our partner and take the digital technology market, combine renewable energy technology and digital technology with value added to our business model from commodity to digital services and expand our business even as well as to the European through Hong Kong. My company focus on the cold and storage home appliances as a start and the beginning. Get the ball rolling, and nowadays we are diversified to raw material and the project development. And get to take these opportunities and try to leverage and see if we are able to bring more opportunities and from Canada to Hong Kong as well to the Asia as well. That's about us at the moment.
Great, thank you so much, Joseph. And we're off, so there's lots to talk about, as I mentioned at the beginning, but why don't we start here? Oftentimes we have this kind of chicken and egg scenario where, do we really start to do the work, or do we need to create a bit of a case for change and maybe wrap different people's minds around it? So Anne, maybe I'll throw it to you. How do you start? Like when in your travels, as you're working with your clients, how do you create that case for change, or do you really just kind of get going and then let the work demonstrate the success for itself, and then it builds momentum? So like, how do you engage in these conversations with your clients?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the chicken and egg thing can sometimes be an excuse for inaction when people say, oh, we don't know what to do. Everyone interprets things differently. But I think, fortunately, this is much easier now. Earlier, it was much harder to try to convince people, and that business case was so important. It still is, of course, but more people are getting it. And since COVID, and with the support, thank you, Terence, of the financial sector and innovative technologies coming from like Brent and Joseph, it's sort of coming together in a positive, perfect storm. So that is a lot easier. Having said that, what I really try to get my clients to do is to have very clear leadership from the top and an understanding of what sustainability, what their environmental, social governance risks are. So then they can see that as an opportunity to improve their performance, attract the talent that they want, the investors that they need, and to sort of be able to build that momentum for change. So it's about having the leadership understand what sustainability means to the business. And if they want to be future fit and resilient, what should they be putting in place now to be able to be more flexible and adapt? So that really starts with looking at what are the frameworks that are of relevance to that company, like the requirements, whether that's legal or standards, and then putting in place a very clear strategic framework so that everybody knows what are our goals to achieve our purpose, and then what are the actions that are needed, and then doing stakeholder engagement internally, externally, to find out what really matters and what people are concerned about, and to sort of build that roadmap with stakeholders so that everybody has some ownership of where they're going and feels part of it. So having a clear roadmap, I would say, leadership from the top, then supported by resources that show that putting your money where your mouth is, so that people see that their performance evaluations involve an assessment of how well if they're contributing to the sustainability goals or implementing the strategy. Of course, remuneration is very important as well, and that makes people move. So it's starting small with defining the purpose, something clear, something that companies can get around, and then having that roadmap, and then aligning everything from the board, having the board address the ESG, all the way through management and supporting and recognizing everyone's role.
Yeah, I think that's so spot on, that tone from the top, and also that old saying, right? What gets measured gets managed, and if you align really the company's vision and mission statement, and you mentioned remuneration as well, right? Like making sure that incentive systems are in alignment with what we expect outcomes to be, I think that's really how you ultimately get to there. And even from my perspective, clients are not, they're expecting and demanding us to be behaving in this manner as well, and making sure that we are contributing.
Yeah, that's really a great addition. I forgot to mention also the importance of having those performance metrics, the KPIs set up to measure the impact of what you're trying to achieve. And then very clearly communicating your progress in getting there is essential. And that's, that's also what's attracting sustainable finance, right? So meeting those kinds of terms gets you more preferential financing, for example.
For sure. Okay, so the case for change, making sure that different companies and the ethos of our operating kind of operandi is aligned to these kinds of goals. I kind of maybe think about that in terms of software, the hardware, the infrastructure, and all of the big physical elements of actually making this a reality. Brent, I turn to you. How are you thinking about that within the energy sector, and what kind of keeps you up at night and really kind of keeps you busy as you look to make these big transformations as well in what I kind of think about the hardware space?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at hydrogen in particular, my sole focus. So, there is significant amounts of infrastructure involved. I know Anne mentioned a bit of the chicken and egg sometimes. I mean, this is a classic example of a chicken and egg issue. We hear about that all the time. I mean, is the demand there to justify the supply? Is there supply there ready for the demand? And I think what we're trying to do in the Edmonton region is really break some of that typical challenge around the chicken and egg. It's really by working together, and again, by leadership. Anne mentioned that, so I think it's very relevant to what we're trying to do. Is I've been working on climate change, clean tech for 30 years, and we've made some successes, but we never always had that degree of alignment and leadership, whether it's amongst governments at the municipal level, the provincial level, the federal level, international agreement. And that's really the difference now. We seem to have a high degree of alignment. Yes, we'll still have some occasional disagreements around how we implement things. But when we look at the net zero economy, the 2050 targets, that's the game changer now. So now companies, governments really know it's not just about incremental change anymore. This is about a major structural shift, and it's not going to be easy. We know it's going to be very difficult. It's an all hands on deck approach, but now we can start to see that, and that's why we're seeing some of these investments. Hydrogen's not new to our region in Edmonton. We've been providing hydrogen for industrial applications for well over 30-40 years. It's just part of how we do business. And over the last 10 years, we've made some real significant inroads around infrastructure. So things like carbon capture and storage. We were doing it as maybe some R&D projects 20 years ago, but really for the last 10 years, we've been doing some major world scale, large scale projects for CO2 storage, where we're injecting 1 million tons per year in more than one project. It's actually in a couple projects. So nowhere else in the world is some of that work really taking place other than in the Edmonton region. So how do we lever that now? We've got some real strong infrastructure in place. We're seeing companies looking to invest in that, but now we want to get more economic activity out of it. So that's where it really comes back to that leadership again, the collaboration amongst sectors to build out demand for things like hydrogen. We know it's going to be very important for key sectors, but how do we aggregate some of that demand? And that's what we're doing in Edmonton with the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, is really focusing on that demand side of the equation. We can produce hydrogen, we know that. We've got the geological formations, we have the natural gas, we have even renewable potential for that, but it's now, do we have the demand ready to go? So that's where we're spending a lot more time, and that's where it's really a collaborative effort amongst governments to understand, what's the first step we need to take in building out that demand? What sector is it going to be? We're focused on things like the trucking sector. And then on the international side, I think it's really important to understand, where are other jurisdictions going? Where are the sectors going globally? Because what we're seeing now is even as supply chains start to make some adjustments, given geopolitical issues, climate change issues, there's maybe some new opportunities. So we need to really take a good look at that, and where are those partnerships where we can now maybe work with jurisdictions that maybe we always haven't typically worked closely with, to understand how maybe some of those investments will now need to be in locations where you can produce clean energy, clean hydrogen, for example, and access international markets at the same time.
Yeah, I can certainly say with some level of certainty that even in Hong Kong, there's so much opportunity to be embracing hydrogen and other kind of alternative forms of energy, because there is, there's, I mean, just have to look at a summer day in the skyline, right? There's an awful lot of pollution that goes around. And so, the sooner we can move towards cleaner energy, frankly, the better. Are you seeing, just as a follow-up, are you seeing the demand from Asia or from international waters? Is there much conversation or collaboration there yet, or is it still pretty early days?
No, definitely. And we're watching the Asian market very closely. Actually, about a year ago, we held webinars really focused on the key global markets for hydrogen, whether it's in China, whether it's in Japan, Korea, as well as the United States. So, we're really zooming in on those markets, want to really be able to demonstrate we're already a low-cost producer of clean hydrogen here. Now we want to make sure we can get to those markets and work very collaboratively across industries to demonstrate that. So it's a high degree of focus. We have strategies both at the federal level in Canada. Provincially, we have a roadmap. They all see exports of hydrogen as being really important. And we have essentially what the world's looking for. We can scale. We have significant volumes at scale that are going to be of interest to the globe as they look towards their own net zero commitments, whether it's in the power generation sector, the mobility sector. So, I think now the challenge is there, and now we are working on executing that, with support from, again, governments across Canada, as well as our industries working closely together on this opportunity.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brent. So, like larger corporations, and as Anne mentioned, we tend to have specific ESG targets. We've got kind of broader KPIs and shareholders, as well as communities that we need to kind of stay accountable for. Joseph, question for you then. When it comes to smaller or even medium-sized enterprises or entrepreneurial businesses, how do they get started? Because oftentimes it does come with some cost initially to get going, right? So how are you seeing kind of these SMEs mobilize themselves and really move towards these kinds of targets as well? Like how are they thinking about it?
Thank you, Terence. That's a very good question. A lot of people really scared about that because the cost is quite a high cost if you want to really start in the fresh. But absolutely, the road is not easy, but there's a lot of opportunities for all sides of the company. Carbon zero has to start with balance and offset. Our everyday action at home and at work consume energy and product carbon emission, such as driving, frying, heating, building. Carbon offsetting is used to balance out that the emission by helping to pay for emission saving in other parts of the world. It is all related to us. I'm more into the application from renewable and sustainable energy, which bring us how to use low energy, such as DC power, by using no impact to our normal lifestyle. There are many different industries, such as aircraft, automotive, marine, construction industry. Big company always focus at the planning and big items. They also need the infrastructure for their revolution, such as like Tesla. Tesla, how they build the EV from the idea, engineering, prototyping, at the end is execution. They are not only Tesla, it's all the successful for the supplier. The supplier put the parts and components together and make it happen. Instead, there will be an electric vehicle battery plant set for Windsor, Ontario, largest automotive investment for countries. The first EV battery plant expect to start operate in 2024, 2 years from now, a joint venture between European automaker and South Korean battery makers. There is a 4.5 billion plan is expecting to create 2,500 jobs in the region. It absolutely to achieve the federal government zero emission goal. Absolutely, the federal plan is to require that half of all new cars sold in Canada being zero emission vehicle by 2030. 5 years after that, all new vehicles sold must be zero emission. Currently, only 5% of all new vehicles sold in Canada are EV. In order to put demanding, there need to be more infrastructure, like charging station to support the vehicle. While EV are zero emission, the process surrounding EV battery, parts and components, production are not supporting that. There will be a lot of opportunities for all kinds of the size company, such as making steel, rubber and plastic, making material that go into developing and making the vehicle. It's not only example from the automotive industry. There will be a lot other massive industry infrastructure need to be support from all sides of the company, such as like housing. As mentioned, our company focus on the cold and storage, home appliances as a start and the beginning only. Get the ball rolling, and now we are diversified to raw material as well, the project development, which we are also supporting the infrastructure to housing and automotive industry too. That is going to tell you, all sides of the company is able to become a green and sustainable energy business. And that is it's about how you set up your plan, but you don't have to give up everything else, but you have to roll to planning for how to step into there. So that is all opportunities right over there.
Thanks, Joseph. And I think, you know, what you talked about around kind of the smaller appliances, even just smaller home appliances, and starting there, that's really where the impact of all of this work is, I think, felt by everyday life, right? And interestingly enough, our very first question that came in, I think it'd be kind of fun for all of us to answer as well, is right here. Thank you so much for the conversation. It's great to see so many people or companies getting involved. How are you guys actually living and breathing these kinds of principles as well? So what are we doing in our everyday lives to make changes? So I'll start. I actually learned very recently that and I admit, my desire to keep up with the most recent version of the iPhones, and I'm an Apple user, and I admit that. But every single time I buy a new iPhone and I want to keep up with the new release, that actually creates, or that's actually consuming an awful lot of carbon credit. So my commitment that I've made to myself recently is like, let's not try to, there's no real need to keep up with the most recent version. I don't need to buy the 14 after the 13 and the 15 after the 14. So I can keep my phone for just a little bit longer and maybe skip a generation or two, and that will actually help reduce it. So I think that's my little contribution, among other things anyway, but that one was actually spotlighted to me quite recently. So maybe Joseph, we'll start with you. What are you doing in your everyday life to help reduce the carbon footprint?
As I said, you know, we are trying to plan, and because everyday action is going to be involved with that. So you have to have a well planning for your life and not only wasting your energy at the time. So once when you have a well planning for that, you are not wasting any energy. So at the second step is from my house to my offices. Now we're changing everything to be off the grid, which we're talking about. We're using a solar plant. We're using a solar power with that. As my product is a solar home appliances, with some other product right now is already being the DC. Because if you know more into the green energy or sustainable energy, they're able to provide you more lifestyle is not going to be changed, such as like your iPhone, similar idea, because in the past you have to plug into your AC adapter to charging. Now we don't have to be doing that because your AC your adapter already been a DC. All the big company already look into that and try to lower the power consumption and try to be lavish about the green energy.
Okay, great, thanks. And Brent, what are you up to? How are you making these small changes in your personal life?
Yeah, probably not enough of them, but you know, I sort of go back, where can I sort of get some additional benefits? And for me, it might be, you know, we just recently decided to go from a couple cars in the family to one car in the family, and make more use of things like the bicycle when, you know, needing to go to work, or other smaller trips when we have other options like that are pretty simple. So for me, that's a very simple one, probably a more cost-effective one as well. Save some dollars wherever I can, and certainly, you know, reduce the need to keep filling up tanks. Then managing, of course, you know, how many trips we need to be driving around in. So I guess I've been focused a little more on that side of it and trying to get healthier at the same time.
Great. And last but not least, yourself.
Yeah, I grew up in a household with a mom who had survived the war in England, so we didn't waste anything. A little girl, I had to go with the compost in the backyard, scared of the raccoons, and then we would use that soil to make the grow the vegetables. So I'm a little bit of an different, but today I just try to look at, and I think this is what everybody can do. It's sort of what Brent and Joseph have alluded to or shared examples of. It's like, look at everything you do. And can you make a different choice that will have a reduced environmental impact or have a social good, you know, buying local, for example. Terence, your example about the phone. I have a Samsung 8. I think we're on model 21 now. I'm going to use that till I can't. I have an old computer, same. So it's about your tech. I look for every option to not have irresponsible packaging, you know, for things that work. Soap, shampoo, you can get solid versions. You don't have to have it in a plastic container. I eat less meat. I don't drive a car. I can do that because I live in Hong Kong and public transport's awesome. But it's just every little, you know, I've been wearing this dress for many years. You know, it's buying things you love, that you're well chosen. Look up what the companies are doing. Are they, you know, if you're going to make a choice. I picked Samsung because at the time, Steve Jobs was still around and he hadn't done anything to address the conditions in the factories in China. And so I picked Samsung instead when you couldn't get BlackBerry anymore in here. Sorry, I'm going on a bit much, but just everything you do, think about, is there a more environmentally or socially responsible option?
Yeah, no, I think that a lot of good lessons learned there as well. Okay, Anne, let's go back to you. So we've now talked about making sure that kind of vision and alignment of incentive systems. So kind of the software, we talked about kind of all the innovation happening in the hydrogen space with Brent, kind of smaller, medium size enterprises, and just other kind of appliances and what have you. Is there still a whole lot of work to be done to create that case then? Like, so where are your typically most challenging conversations? And back to you again, because I feel like the awareness is there, and we all talk about ESG. There's changes in everyday life, right? We're not really picking up plastic straws anymore at the local Starbucks. They're all kind of paper recyclable straws. So then where's the heavy lifting? What would be kind of the biggest roadblocks or hurdles that you're encountering as you speak with clients?
It's a tough one. I think it's getting people to accept that business as usual just can't happen anymore. It's trying to, like, being negative doesn't inspire action. But we have a climate crisis, as you've mentioned, and a biodiversity, collapse on the horizon. So it's I guess, trying to show people the seriousness of our situation with the carrots on what we can do. Like, you have to be positive. So, it's convincing the HR people that they really do need to change the practices that are not inspiring people to be their best. The rules, like not having the trust. Some of the companies that bounced back best during COVID, I'm using one small example, were the ones that already had flexi work times and people were set up to work from home. So they that was important, one part. I often will use peer examples to show what other companies are doing as a way of saying, look, this can happen and it works. You look back to Unilever with its big goals, its big purpose statement. And then it set up developing new product lines that incorporated environmental and social considerations. And those started to perform better than others. So it's looking to examples of cultural change, behavioral change, as well as the sort of hard examples that companies change to their product lines. So, you know, the companies that have diverse boards, even in Vietnam, I work with a private equity firm that's done research into all the publicly listed companies and who have the composition of women on the board of directors and at the management level, because it's all publicly available. And those companies are performing better. There are other factors as well, of course, but it's sort of finding proof points and showing that sustainability ESG is about integration. It's not separate. Trying to get people to see how, you know, I'm the building manager. So if having a good thermal comfort level can be good for environment, cost saving, but also people. So I always try to show the other elements of how everything is related, which helps people see the benefits of what they're doing. I've had clients where their business model didn't work, but partly they didn't have an engaged board with proper oversight that was really for asking the hard questions and forcing their business model to change. So it's, I could go on and on, as you can tell, but I guess it's helping people to see that what's in it for them, and how by making the changes and thinking more broadly about the implications of what they do from an environmental social point of view, how that will benefit the company and others.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And even for us at RBC within wealth management, last year we created a whole series of different portfolios and investment solutions, all centered around sustainability and technology. So what we kind of married together and we call SUSTech. And the whole hypothesis behind that is ESG and those types of principles are great from a corporate governance perspective and kind of being sustainable ourselves, but at the same time, that's almost like saying, okay, we will no longer do any evil from this point on. But is there anything we can do to actually rewind the clock, if you will, or even move it backwards? So let me explain. ESG, climate change and the way the Earth has, I guess, evolved over the many centuries that humans have been roaming around. It's almost like we've been driving our car, forgive the pun, off this cliff, and ESG is kind of saying, okay, we're going to stop driving that car, or we're going to stop moving that car towards that cliff. Where sustainability and technology meets, and where companies are actually coming together to solve these problems and to proactively create solutions, it's kind of like driving the car backwards, right? So actually moving it away from that cliff. And our clients are demanding that their parents or their grandparents start to divert the wealth that they've accumulated over the years towards these types of companies or solutions that are solving these things. And so that's also kind of, it's not mutually exclusive, right? It's not a phenomenon where if we do this, then we miss out on that. It's actually all kind of interlinked and quite beneficial to everybody. And as my clients are looking to invest their dollars, they see better returns in the long run as well when they're looking for these types of investments. So that brings me back to Brent. Obviously, the finding the demand and then creating more momentum to drive that transformation in the infrastructure space. Is there more that you need to do? Like if you had kind of a wish list, what would you want, or what would you need to see happen to create even more demand for all the different things that you're working on?
Yeah, no, I think definitely there's a need for some systematic process to build demand, and I guess we'll look at it from either a national or a regional perspective. And that comes back to maybe it's those incentives. How do we start to move people in the direction they need to go, or that they know they need to go? So example would be, we've got a policy framework in Canada where and the carbon charges that are outlined, and there was some just recent announcements as well. And we know that let's say hydrogen will be very economic compared to other alternatives for, let's say, the heavy duty truck transportation sector by a certain year. So they know that this will make some sense, but it's still a pretty expensive proposition to do that capital stock turnover, and maybe at a more accelerated rate. So how can that be facilitated? What's the incentive mechanisms? And maybe there's even some bridging mechanisms. How do we make use of some of the existing capital stock better in a future energy transition way? So we have companies in Edmonton actually that are working on dual fuel technology, so you can actually blend diesel and hydrogen and make that transition. So you don't necessarily have to go buy that very expensive new Class 8 fuel cell truck. Now we're going to be doing that as well, but there'll be some of the infrastructure on the road that probably wouldn't make as much sense in the immediate term or short to medium term to do that change. So I think those are the types of things we need to be looking at, and do it in a coordinated way, again, with government. So if we're looking at incentives, where will those incentives make the most sense to begin to drive some of the change? And I guess I actually want to come back to some of the points that Anne made. I think we kind of also talk a bit about some of the challenges, but the ESG side as well, where investors are looking for some of these changes. And I'll come back to the whole labor side, the talent side as well, because I think that's what's also exciting. We know we're challenged where some of the workforce of tomorrow is thinking, well, I'm not so sure I really want to be involved in that sector anymore, that maybe seem to be a little bit not as climate friendly as they feel it should be. But at the same time, we have these incredible opportunities I'll again come back to hydrogen, to use some of that talent base in a way that they can now start to see, wow, I can now be part of that energy transformation. I didn't realize that these oil and gas companies are actually now spending more time on hydrogen, and very similar skills that they've developed can now have some applicability. So how do we get more of that messaging out? Because I think it'll come back to the talent, the workforce that we need for this energy transition. And it's going to be massive. We talk about a $2 trillion to maybe $11 trillion shift, and that's a lot of investment, but that's a lot of talented expertise that's going to be required to make that happen. So how do we kind of leverage the resources that we already have in the system to do that? And that's something we're trying to do, and I think it's very well aligned. The work in Edmonton, our region, on that talent side, to begin to prepare for this shift that we see coming very quickly.
So just on talent, then maybe a follow-up for you: are there things that maybe universities and the education system more broadly can start to pivot towards or pivot away from, to make sure the next generation of talent is actually well equipped and well trained and prepared to embark on a career that's in this space?
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily critique. I think they're probably doing great work at the universities, but I guess in that recruitment process, to make sure there's an understanding that this same engineering work that you maybe be going through for, let's just say, petroleum engineering, is still going to be very valuable in the energy transition space. I don't think of it as there's lost opportunities here. If anything, there's going to be more and more, because we're going to see some rapid transformation, whether it's next generation technologies to produce hydrogen or to be using it in different industrial applications. So very similar skill set, and I think it's really just how do we market that a bit differently to our students of today and tomorrow.
Right, makes good sense. Joseph, back to you again. So you spent some time talking about kind of the everyday application of moving towards a greener world. What is the next kind of horizon for you then? Like you've kind of moved towards, you've got small appliances, and you've got solar panels and electronic vehicles. What would be next for you, and where do you see the biggest opportunity for growth as you're expanding your businesses on both sides of the Pacific and with your customers?
Thank you, Terence. Well, first of all, I want to make sure, well, because we are from the consumer side, start from the consumer side and thinking about all the possibility and make our growing is suitable for their lifestyle. So going green and sustainable, referring to all the aspect of environmental friendly product from fashion to building to the movement as a whole. Eco-friendly means that a product, practice, and activities won't harm the environment. And that is the whole idea where we're coming from. Of course, from our perspective, we start with the appliances. As I mentioned about now, we go forward with our development, and we are on the raw material development as well. So start from that perspective, we're also thinking about how to develop the whole total green, environmental friendly building. And that is what we are looking into right now, because we are more leaning to the lifestyle. So with our perspective, we also look into like a tiny home, passive house, and a zero carbon home, and also shipping container home. And that we work very closely with all different builders right now. That is our legs growing. From the raw material, we are not only the panel, we also work with some technology side, which is how to laminate with the glasses and take as much as possible for the green energy, and then can support for the whole building. And that's just the way we are looking into right now. And that is our next growing for our company.
Yeah, my wife's an interior designer, and she's been working with a lot of her clients as well. And the amount of questions on how to create a greener, a more sustainable home, right, is actually quite amazing, right? Like how can they incorporate those types of principles into designing their own home, whether that's something simple as a place to compost food waste, to ensuring that air quality is as clean, the water, the source of the water is also as clean as possible. It just creates an ambiance where and you're just living or sleeping, right, during your everyday life, and it creates that calming environment. It's just better for the human body as well to recharge. And so I think, there's these big questions about, moving the world towards a particular place. But I think, like I mentioned earlier, right, where rubber really hits the road, if you will, is when people start to see it manifest within their everyday lives. We're coming up to time almost.
Bear in mind one thing, sorry about that. Zero carbon emission and the green energy are definitely not the pattern of the big company, but the goal and the vision of everyone work together. And that is the way, and it's very important. I also agree with Anne and Brett about leading the bigger pieces. That has to be from the government, because government is going to leading and support the industry before we are moving forward on that. And that is kind of the combination is a very important.
Okay, so we're coming up on time almost, but maybe if I can ask everybody one last question, same question. If there's one thing that you want the audience who's tuned in today to take away, like one action item, the one ask of them, what would that be? Like, what would you ask the audience to do kind of from this day going forward? Maybe Joseph, we'll start with you.
Start living in the green, start living in the, what I can say is try off the grid, try to experience. That is the first step, and people will be enjoy it, because without your first step, nobody will know what is the next step. Okay, great. Thanks, Joseph. And Brent, what would be your ask? What would be on your top of your wish list?
Well, I mean, I guess speaking from the perspective of an agency or an organization focused on investment attraction, and we're really about radically transforming the Edmonton region of Canada. So I guess we're looking for others to recognize that maybe how you perceived regions in the past is changing quickly. And, some of the work we're doing on energy is certainly one example of that, but, other areas as well, whether it's life sciences, pharmaceutical industries, artificial intelligence, machine learning. There's really an incredible amount of work going on to, bring those technologies together across industries. That's really changing maybe how we've traditionally perceived of industries. So I guess if it's a wish for some of the folks on the investment side there, or from business, is as you're looking at things like the energy transition, just remember that, things are changing very quickly. It's a new paradigm out there. And, we're moving very quickly. And again, maybe how we've traditionally looked at, where certain industries would be located, or how energy is being used, the role of renewables, the role of CO2 storage, that's all redefining things. So I guess it's time to have a fresh look at things. And we're very much part of that conversation.
Great, thanks so much, Brent. And Anne, from you, what would be your number one ask?
It's hard to have one, Terence. I think it would be that, of course, government setting a level playing field and investors demanding change are the biggest, are big sources for action. But I think my message would be, if you embrace sustainability holistically, it will only be good for your business, for talent attraction, for future proofing, everything I've mentioned. And to not just think of ESG as like over there, something new we got to deal with. I mean, everyone has a government structure. We all interact with the environment. We all interact with people. So just, what is putting that lens on everything we do and seeing how can we do it better, not just accepting the status quo, and pushing for those big goals, so that, we need to get there. If we're going to survive, we need the net zero. We need a just society. So, what are the big goals? And then working together to, be with other people, asking questions, getting innovative ideas, collaborations, to just say we don't have a plan. We don't have a planet B, right? I don't want to live on Mars or the moon. We have a beautiful planet. So what can we do to support everybody and just move towards a more sustainable future?
Great, thank you, Anne. And from myself, my ask would be, for all of my other fellow leaders within the corporate space, make an effort to embed this into your company strategy, and make an effort to embed it into the culture. Because I think, we all have an ability to influence not only just our employees, but our customers and our clients alike, and really live by example, right? There's little things that we can do, as we all talked about, every little things in our everyday life, and your example around just, a very well-made piece of clothing that you can wear, that's timeless, technology that we can reuse without necessarily chasing the new, iteration. And Joseph, you mentioned just little things in your everyday life as well, in your home, that you can start to buy, more smartly. These are all things that you can do, and when your own employee base and your customers see you doing the same thing, then they'll start to believe that you're actually representing those types of values as well. It's been a great conversation. So thank you all so much to Anne and Brent and Joseph for the dialogue, and also for the insightful responses as well. Thank you all to our attendees today as well for participating. We really appreciate your time. And if you'd like to connect with myself or any of our speakers today, please feel free to do so via LinkedIn. In the meantime, though, we do look forward to seeing you in the networking session. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Terence, and thank you, Canadian Chamber.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye for now.